Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in. This episode was recorded at Chaosium Con 2024.
Good afternoon, everyone. We're the RPG Reanimators, and today we're going to discuss how to bring classic 1920s scenarios to modern day, starting with maybe one of the most well-known Call of Cthulhu scenarios, The Haunting by Sandy Petersen. We're going to start with an introduction and overview of the main points and takeaways, plot beats of the scenario, and then move into steps that we can take to try and bring it into a more modern setting. We're going to aim to do it if the haunting was happening today, right now, and then talk about some alternative options if you were wanting to run it. If you somehow managed to avoid reading or experiencing the scenario before now, then unfortunately, you might want to step away or get ready for some spoilers. I'm Lex.
I'm Alex.
I'm Nathan.
I'm Holly.
All right, so let's just start at the beginning. Who wants to kind of walk me through the haunting in general? All right.
So basically, The Haunting is a scenario about the investigators exploring the house of a quasi-dead sorcerer named Walter Corbett. I say quasi-dead because his mind's stored in his rotting corpse that's kind of preserved in the hidden section of his basement. The investigators are introduced to the scenario when they are hired to explore the rumors that the Corbett house is haunted. Now, Corbett's motivations are to scare away or kill the investigators who look too closely into the house when they enter it. So, before we modernize the scenario, we got to identify the locations and the clues that can be found at these locations. So, just running through it really quick, there's the Boston Globe. The clues that can be found there are newspaper clippings for an unpublished story about how people died at the Corbett house. There's the Central Library, where they can find information about a lawsuit that Walter Corbett has had bad behavior in the neighborhood. People wanted to evict him from the neighborhood. There's also a clue there where there's a rumor that he wanted to be buried in the basement. There's the Hall of Records, where his will was executed by a pastor of a strange and mysterious chapel of contemplation and church of our Lord Granter of Secrets. At the higher courts, at the Central Police Station, there's the clue that there was a secret raid on this chapel. There's the location of the neighborhood around the Corbett house, where the investigators can interact with Mr. Dooley, a NPC that warns the investigators that the most recent family there, the Marcario family, went crazy and are now at the sanitarium. There's a location of the sanitarium where they can chat with those NPCs, the Marcario family, and they just hint that a dagger that Corbett uses can be used against him. And then there's the ruins of the Chapel of Contemplation where that raid happened. If the investigators do investigate that, they can find a journal that confirms that Corbett is in fact in the basement instead of just having a rumor. And then last but not least, there's the Corbett house, which is the real meat and potatoes of the scenario where all the horror happens, all the unnatural stuff happens. And this is also where the finale is going to be.
I just want to know where he got that lawyer that somehow did this will that's like, yeah, put the body in the basement and no one would touch it for years, apparently.
It's just storage. It's just storage.
Just throw Corbett in the back. Don't worry about him. Stack some tennis nets on him, whatever.
Okay, so thanks for the summary, Alex. And now I want to sort of loop us back to the beginning. A lot of Call of Cthulhu scenarios tend to start with, you are private investigators. You have been hired to look into this spooky thing and go. But if you were going to try to bring this into a modern day, what sort of hooks or setup would you use to bring your players in?
You know, I think that you can really play with the modern angle a lot. You could do paranormal investigators. That's always a favorite of mine in intro, is just like you have a YouTube channel. You are really passionate about investigating haunted houses. Or you could be urban explorers, or you're on an HGTV show, let's refurbish this old house, and you've started to just you're filming an episode to, what's the word I'm looking for? Renovate. Thank you. Yeah, renovate this old home. And then that's the kind of the catalyst. So you could go in with your players already knowing something's going weird with this place, or you could go in where your players don't know, and all of a sudden this weird stuff is occurring to them that drives them toward investigating what's happening.
Yeah, and don't forget that a lot of people do dumb stuff for internet clout nowadays.
I haven't heard that.
I'm shocked. I think I've been binging a lot of the Hell House LLC movies for the past week, and so my favorite idea to try to revamp this for a modern day is I love the idea that another group of people already went to the Corbett house to turn it into a haunted house, and there was some awful catastrophe that happened there. Someone apparently dove out of the second floor window and killed themselves. Someone went crazy and stabbed a bunch of people down in the basement, and they're just like, they're locked up in prison right now. But have a group of NPCs essentially go through every bad end that's possible in that house. And then the players are there like as the urban explorers or like amateur YouTube documentarians, but like, we're going to get to the bottom of why the police aren't investigating it. And like, there's your setup. And if your players also are not familiar with it, which I would hope they are, you can foreshadow all of the possible deaths. That obviously the person didn't jump out the second floor, the bed hit them, but they're not going to anticipate that, and they're going to get a lot of, oh damn, that's how that happened.
As the pillow is rushing towards their head.
Yeah, exactly. There's like that split second, that makes more sense.
Well, and weirdly, there really is, views are more enticing than what, $20 a day? That's another big thing with these old ones is you can say a million times, oh, $20 a day is a lot. It still just doesn't hit the same.
Mm-hmm. I think that that's a big reason why I tend to want to run things in a more modern setting is because not only is it much easier to improvise, like if you need to talk about your players are going off on a tangent, I have no idea what a lot of things were like in the 20s. I'm like, there's prohibition? But if it's modern, then I can be like, okay, great, you're going to go to the tax offices. Look, Corbett actually set up an LLC to hold this house after his death. So that's why the property didn't transfer for X number of years, yada, yada, yada. And not only that, but players can understand those motivations a little better. Like if I have to keep saying $20 a day is a lot, that doesn't really matter. But if it's, look, you can get a job with the Boston Globe or the New York Times if you can show this is a competent reporter, that's something that people can get behind and empathize with. But anyways, I'm getting sidetracked. Let's talk about some of the key locations and the information you can find there, and then how we could try to bring those up. I just mentioned the Boston Globe, so we can go ahead and start there. Don't all speak up at once.
Oh, okay. Oh, my goodness. All right. So one of the things that we hear a lot with the modern stuff, right, is that the internet trivializes a lot of searches. And that's, I mean, to a certain point, true. The Globe, though, you can still, if you really want people to interact with the NPCs, there's kind of a little weirdo in the basement, I think, that kind of lords over that you can't get to the information. If you still want to have that, you can if you don't want to digitize the records, or, you know, find a different way to kind of bring in this guy. Maybe he's the one that keeps the records in his house and is digitizing them himself and hasn't got to it. Just if that's what you're looking for, is kind of that effort to get to the clue.
Potentially, yeah. I mean, it's just in my experience in running a different game like Music from a Darkened Room, where they have, you know, records for the house go way, way back. And they digitize things up until about the 70s. And then they figured like, well, if someone's really interested, we have the stacks. But like they hire a bunch of high schoolers for minimum wage. They're not going to be super motivated to keep extensive records of everything. So I tend to, instead of having someone to lord over, be like, no, you make me feel important. It's just a high schooler that's like having an orange Slurpee. It's like, I mean, what do I need to do? Or like bribe them with, I don't know, Starbucks.
Well, and I think to play on the idea of the concern, which, you know, could be valid, the concern of the internet just fast tracks all of the answers that you might have, that the age of the internet is also the age of like misinformation and disinformation. Like your players could find a ton of information that is not in any way accurate to the story at all.
Right.
So,
like, how much do you believe of what you read online today? It's most of the time you're not reading it with a grain of salt, but one of the big cubes they give cows. So they can find the information, but it's from some weirdo's blog that also mentions eagle people and then energy vampires. So you're like, don't know.
And that's might be an option for the chapel, because they've somewhat disbanded, but I could absolutely see the chapel running like a truth campaign about, oh, you heard that our chapel got attacked, but that's not really what happened.
That's not
no,
the
Mr.
real
Corbett's
news.
not buried in his basement. Who would do that?
That's crazy.
And you have the option, like with these articles, if you don't even want to make them newspaper articles, right? Some crackpot conspiracy YouTuber has made videos about it. You won't believe what happened in 1972 at the Corbett House. And then again, that's like a mound of salt, a Kilimanjaro-sized mountain of salt. Like, do you really want to take this at face value, you know?
Okay, so then we've got covered the Boston Globe. Central Library, I think, is kind of more of the same. They might have some digital records. They might have to go there in person. That's kind of up to you. I think it's more, I often hear a common critique, like sort of what y'all mentioned, that, well, the internet removes a lot of opportunities for role play. Like, they don't have to interact with the librarian or the journalist or the front desk. Like, if they can just Google it and find everything online. Well, yes and no. I think that you may not need to come up with more NPCs with silly voices. Like, you don't have to have Gladys the librarian, but you could instead make the search for the information more engaging. They can't, like, if you just pull up a Wikipedia for the Corbett House, no, there's not anything. But if they find like some old blog posts and they need to weed through a bunch of suspicious information and go through there, I've done that a lot with one of our players in an Impossible Landscapes game, and he's been really engaged in trying to sift through Phenomen X articles, but like, what is BS? What are people saying is BS, but might actually be true? And so it's just more a question of like, can you have new ways to engage your players that is not just talking to people?
And honestly, Lex, I will not forget when our player in that campaign and this search for information posts the yellow sign on the internet for everyone to see and go, does anyone know what this is? Does anyone know what this means? Like, oh, good. Yeah. Oh, great. That's good. Let's keep spreading that around. So yeah, there's definitely ways you can like leverage it. Reply. Oh yeah. And then the reply when he was genuinely like, because I don't know what this is. Does anyone know what this is? And someone's like, oh yeah, man, let me show you. I got a picture right here. And it was that stupid, the 90s Super S. Does anyone know what I'm talking about? Like the cool S with like all the lines. Everyone's like, yeah, that's it right there. And it's like, oh my God, are you serious? But that's like a fun way to interact, right? Like, yeah. Yep. Go ahead, Alex.
And just to address like the NPC concerns where you're removing a physical NPC to talk to, you could still have an interaction where you're searching, you're asking questions on these blogs. You could have a mysterious user reply to those questions and actually be super helpful and make your players super paranoid. On like, oh, well, how do they actually end up knowing all that?
Sure thing, David. I'm happy to help.
Oh,
yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Okay, and so now getting into the horrors of bureaucracy then. So let's focus on like the Hall of Records and the higher courts at the Central Police Station. Is there anything that you would really change for that? Or honestly, like, it hasn't been updated that much.
No, okay, I was about to say, as someone who works for the government, I can confirm that, you know, the difference between how fast government worked 100 years ago and how fast it works now, not much faster. It's all still bogged in bureaucracy.
Oh, yeah. I submitted a Freedom of Information Act request for submarine, just casual blueprint things. That was in 2022. Still have not heard back on that. So if your players want to put in a FOIA, whatever, if they want to put in an official request for it, great. Now what are you going to do? Like, you're waiting weeks. If they want to email a professor, they are going to be lucky to get a reply within a week. Like, it's just a question of some things never change, particularly inadequacies of government. Okay, but so let's talk about the neighborhood then. In the original writing, it was supposed to be the neighbor. Mr. Dooley says that there was a big hubbub around the previous family. And so now they're in the sanitarium. So let's kind of lump both of these together with the neighborhood and then the Macario family. Any tweaks that you would make there to bring it up?
Yeah, go ahead, Alex.
So I would say that sanitariums don't really exist anymore nowadays. So we can explore the possibility of how we can find the Macario family, because I wouldn't really change the neighborhood. Neighborhoods, you go around, you ask someone what they've seen. That's great. Now, the sanitarium, I'd probably change it to maybe the Macario family, they're not homeless, and now they're living on the streets, because that's way more realistic of what happens nowadays, unfortunately. So now we have increased gameplay of, how do we locate this homeless family? And that adds the gameplay because now I got to ask around. I got to ask locals. And it still keeps the NPC, which is what we want.
Yeah, and Holly, I think you had some really good ideas for like other venues that they could try and reach out to the Macarios.
I mean, you know, my my morbid pitch was like they just killed their kids. So now they're in prison or in a hospital. And like that's a whole other avenue that you have to pursue as well if you actually want to track these people down.
Yeah, they may have gotten tried for insanity, and like you can go visit them, and as you're asking questions, like they try very hard to not remember these things because they got sanity blasted because somebody rolled a full 12 on a D12 sand check there, and they get sanity blasted, lose their marbles, and then kill their kid. But in asking them about it, you're going to cause them to relapse. And like that is a huge issue that they're going to have to deal with afterwards. So like just new ways to spice it up a little bit.
Yeah, I'd be interested too to, if they were going to a prison, which I think is a great idea, have it be that they don't want to get out. Is maybe their release date's coming up. They're like, no, I love it here. There's no sharp objects. Nothing going to stab me.
They don't let anyone have knives here.
Right, exactly.
Why is that a concern?
I like that.
So as for the neighborhood itself, I think that a common critique that I see, at least referenced online for modern stuff, is that not only is it so easy for players to access information whenever we have the world at our fingertips with our phones, but it's so easy to call the cops. And it is such a common excuse to say, oh, well, there's no signal. Well, what would you do just in case, like, what if players call the cops for whatever reason at the house?
I like letting them show up and probably promptly, and they come in and it's, so this is haunted, right? And they're looking around. It's like, what exactly is haunted? Well, this knife was flying around. The knife that's laying there? Yes, officer. That knife that's laying there was killing people. That's very interesting. You know how much it costs to waste a police officer's time? Like,
let the police show. Go ahead.
Right.
Now I'm gonna make you role play through.
Just fully embrace it. Fully embrace the technology. If they are so extreme to like SWAT Mr. Corbett's house by saying like there's a bomb threat, like let them have the consequence of calling a SWAT team and then having no evidence at all.
They just take the body out in cuffs. We finally got you son of a gun.
Alternatively, if you want to go the other direction, where they do call the cops, maybe it's a bad neighborhood, and obviously it's going to take a little longer for police response. And at that point, it might be too late for the investigators.
There's a lot of opportunity, too, with that chapel of contemplation. If they're, they grew up in the neighborhood, there's no reason they could have been part of the church. And maybe they say, oh, yeah, I have fond memories of growing up here. No, nothing happens here, ever. The knife is floating behind them or whatever. They're like, I don't see anything. You're on your own. Here, let me lock the door on my way out. Good luck.
Yeah, that's whenever, Officer Wilson happens to turn and you see that tattoo of the Chapel of Contemplation on his neck, and it's like he's a true believer. Or like, I love the idea that you have the cops show up and everything goes quiet. And like maybe the house, bless you, maybe the house creaks enough and it feels almost like a chuckle as it's making the investigators look like idiots because there is an intelligence behind it. Or you just have it act very mundane, bring the cops in, and then it instantly murks them. Now the players have that to deal with. Like if the cops just get killed, and it's like, great. Are you going to call it for backup?
That is going to demonetize you too if you have that on screen.
You got to be monetized first, baby.
Now, I'd like to talk about the ruins of the Chapel of Contemplation. What do ruins look like today versus what they looked like in the 1920s? It might have a condemned sign. It might have plywood nailed to all the windows and the doors, barbed wire, fences, keep out signs, as opposed to the 1920s where it's like, oh, it's just a pile of rubble and it's not really taken care of. So you can really draw your players into that world through these environmental cues, and they can relate to it because this is sometimes what we see in our actual lives today.
I think, and if you want to, continue with the modernization of it all, the Cult of Cthulhu book does have the Church of Perfect Science, which is, totally not a riff on any modern existing church. I mean, it could be that. It could be the Church of Perfect Science, and there was this raid, and now they have the ruins of that, and then you have a little bit more source material to go on from the Cult of Cthulhu book as well. So.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, again, kind of harping on the, it's easier to improvise whenever you're dealing with a modern setting, is it's more conceivable that you can sit there and think about, okay, sketchy church, there's people involved. These people also have access to the internet. They're probably more there at least have a couple of people that are more tech savvy than even your investigators. So if they want to start looking up a lot of information about the church, there's going to be cookies loaded on their browser. Like if they want to start asking some questions, then they may find that like they could get hacked very easily if they're not being smart about it, which like why would they? If you're worried that they're going to casually access information, then start adding some potential landmines for them to come across to make more consequences. Or have the church change its name and they didn't realize that it is now the blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. That's good.
So some landmines that Lex is talking about is smartphones have GPS on them. Smartphones are vulnerable to viruses. I think it's a great scare to open your phone and see that, maybe the apps are changed around, or maybe you're sending out messages to people in your contact list that you don't remember sending out to. I would also say that there's a lot of potential for like random phone calls from that spam number that might, how did you get this number? Really increase that paranoia.
Want to call about your extended warranty?
Well, we joke about like you're swatting Mr. Corbett. Mr. Corbett can swat you. Hey, what are these YouTubers doing in this place? They're setting up a bomb. And there's no, like, Mr. Corbett doesn't care. Upstairs can be a bloodbath. He's just chuckling in his grave.
And I think that this is sort of getting into, we mentioned the meat and potatoes, which is going to be the house. And there are a lot of very staple scares. I think that the bed has more fatalities than most creatures that I've tried to run, let alone the knife downstairs. And you don't need to change a lot of that sort of information. Like those scares are there because they're great and they work. But what bringing it into a modern day can do is bring in new and different things that are deeply unsettling for any player. The whole thing is that if we're using smartphones, I know this. I know how it works. I know that if I get a ding, it's a text message because I know what that tone sounds like. I know what my wallpaper and background look like. But if we're walking through the house and all of a sudden all of our phones start playing, "Let the sun shine in, let it all be." Sorry, I watched Autopsy of Jane Doe. But like if they start playing music, that is going to freak everybody out. If they start sending text messages like asking like, "Oh, hey, can you come over here?" And then their partner starts showing up at the house, then these are ways that you can subvert expectations of normality for these types of devices and find ways that, like, if players are feeling like, "Oh, no, that is not supposed to do that. I can't trust this thing anymore." That is a great fear to tap into and to continue exploring. And more than that, if they want to stomp on their phones, they are cut off from the rest of the world. Like, forget two-factor authentication. Like, they're now on an island. So now you can really mess with them there.
Some ideas are just timeless, like a haunted house is a haunted house, and you wouldn't really need to change or modernize this part of the scenario because it's unnatural, it's something not of this world. Maybe you could modernize it by giving Mr. Corbett a gun, but...
Do it.
But no, I think, we talk about the hurdle of technology when we're bringing things to a modern era, but I think that embracing technology as horror is really the way to go. And because, we like one of my favorite horror movies of all time is The Ring, which is like perfect. Like technology can be horrific. And the idea that embracing that and using the technology against your players instead of considering it as a hurdle to overcome when you're doing modern scenarios is the way to go.
Right. Going into anecdotes again, I was very proud of another spook that I did for that player. Once they realized that they did actually upload the yellow sign to Phenomenex and I think to a calligraphy blog website, just to ask if anyone had seen it before, they tried to delete it. And that was, I made a PowerPoint file that essentially like did a full screen for that. And whenever they clicked delete, it had the like page cannot be completed or something like that. And they click delete again and I would go boom. And every time it would be that same warning, except little words on that pop-up would change each time. And so until it would be like, the request could not be completed. Request could not be hands. And then change it to like, it is a fearful thing to fall into the hands of a living God was the button on the front of that thing. And that was full of hell no energy from the one player. And like, it was beautiful. I think there is a lot of resistance to modernizing these scenarios and talks about how difficult it can be. Because if you're going to be resistant to it, you're kind of missing out on whole new areas that you can bring in for horror. Instead of just like, well, there's no signal, you can't use it, it's not online, you need to play it like it's the 20s because nothing is digitized. But I think you can open up like a whole clamshell of awfulness.
Well, and the beauty of having those devices is that they are communication devices. Mr. Corbett, as is, the old way, he can't really talk to you, right? He can write his journal, you can find that, but you're not going to walk up to him and chat, hey, how's it going? Oh, the sunlight hurts you? That's a bummer. But this way, yeah, he can call you, he can text you, he can FaceTime you.
Like, no, he's old. He can't FaceTime
he probably
you.
Can't FaceTime you, but I mean, you can get this picture of the wall as he's trying to FaceTime you.
He can FaceTime you just from his nose, is like right about under.
Is this on? Is this on? Get out of my house. But you can have more interaction with the finale before it happens, which you don't always get in a lot of these old ones. Although that means you have to build them up probably more beyond just get out of my house. I'm sleeping here.
I mean, like, that was The Conjuring 2, and it worked at least moderately okay with them. Just throw in a spooky nun if you run out of ideas then. That's a different kind of scenario, though, maybe. So what else? Like, we've kind of covered just head to toe. Is there any changes that you would make for Corbett in general? Just keep him as is? We talked a lot last night about needing to switch the dates around, and like, honestly, that is one of the hardest parts whenever I do edits to the scenario. Is in all of my notes I have to just say, like, I can't read the original thing, because if I say 1965, wait, didn't you say 72 earlier? Fuck. Okay. And so being able to just keep track of dates that way, honestly, it doesn't really matter. If you say something was 100 years ago, funny enough, that was in the 1920s. So, like, yeah, just use whatever dates come to mind for that there. But I'm more loosey-goosey in that way.
Yeah, it really doesn't matter unless you're tied to, like, prohibition events or something where you're like, okay, this is a booze running thing. Yeah, okay, that doesn't make sense. Or this is set during World War II. You're kind of stuck. Like, you can update it. That just makes it a little bit tougher.
So we've talked a lot just about sort of using the haunting as a case example. And, you know, I looked up a bunch of critiques and complaints that people have put online to try and address those. But just wondering if y'all in the audience had any, like, issues that you've run into or concerns that you might have, or like if there's a scenario that you would want to try and modernize, and like just trying to spitball any ideas for how to do it. I know I have wanted to bring Dead Light into like an 80s or 90s I'll be home for Christmas scenario. A friend of mine had a really great idea for the entity for that if they try to call out, it actually brings it closer to them, like a little signal, and the phone call audio gets overwhelmed with screaming, crying infants. Roll sand, great. You want to still call the cops again? But yeah, just curious, anybody out there?
I really love the idea of mythos using technology. That blew my mind. I never thought of that before. I don't see like this old landline in going into Corbin's
Where'd this Wi-Fi modem come from?
I love that idea. It's really, really interesting. Never thought of it.
Oh, thank you. No, it's we can't record everything all at once, so I'm just going to repeat. Sorry, but the issue was thinking of the mythos using technology and being able to bring it in to like breathe new life into it. I think that there is there's always an argument that cultists are just as competent as the players, and so like, yeah, they can have an IT guy who is a true believer. You can work with that there. Or I think just because something is already unnatural or supernatural, these, not even phones, but just like radio waves, infrared, stuff that we cannot see or hear or experience as humans, there is no reason to say that other mythos entities are not tapped into those and can bend or distort those as that they would need. And again, like that just adds a whole nother layer of, oh, I didn't think they could do that. And being able to catch your players off guard that way. Also, it provides a great hat to pull rabbits out of if you don't have ideas and be like, yeah, your phone's camera is on. What the fuck? And it's just like, let them be scared and find ways to creep themselves out.
You're going live on YouTube and you didn't even realize
Did you know you were streaming?
I mean, that would be really fun is, oh, you're streaming. Well, what's on the stream? Okay, it's a knife view. Like, it's following the knife as it's zooming
POV,
around.
knife stream, and then you see their back.
Knife to meet you.
Also, I think for that one with technology too, there is a fun anthology of found footage short stories. It's called Found, an anthology of but in the introduction, they had a really great bit where this was actually based on a real instance where this guy would post, essentially it was like Texas wildlife prairie recordings and post them onto YouTube to help people sleep. And they didn't post things for a long while. Neighbors started noticing that there were cows that were emaciated and wandering out loose, and that there were carvings and things into their skin. And it was this huge issue. They sent police out to this ranch property where these cows were apparently neglected and abused, and found that the one who was publishing these videos online apparently was seeing people with blank faces who told him to carve those symbols into the cows, to carve those symbols into his family, and that they found his family members were posed, and like his mother was placed in the bathtub because she liked to take baths. But like all these symbols and things were carved on them. Like this is all actually real. Like it's creepy as hell. But it gets worse because some of the more, well, actually, I think at one point there was footage of his father's decapitated head that was posted online. It was up for about 4 hours before it was taken down. But more than that, people would comment in the later videos that they would have really unsettling, bad dreams from it. And whenever people pulled the audio from those videos, what they found was that at very, very low levels, he apparently recorded what he was doing to the cows and to his family members whenever people isolate that audio. So even then, like you can, I'm loving these reactions, but like you can have like just the mundane, you're listening to your music and you can have like deep Cthulhu dreaming by just adding these very low resonances and like that's still kind of getting into your head, but not just through your dreams. It's through your entertainment. It's through that little escape that you did have, and nothing is safe. Sorry, I talked a lot just now. I'm going to pass it up to somebody. Any other questions or comments or things? Sure, who's that stranger in the back? Yep.
So, like, how, could you speak to updating us, potentially like a Regency Cthulhu, something that has like a social score, or the new Arkham has like a reputational score. Updating that into like the modern world of social media.
I mean, I'm seeing that like corporate cutthroat. Like if they need to keep track of reputation, then like there is a gala that they need to attend to, and Jeeves Stobbs is going to be there, and you need to be sure to not embarrass yourself, or like you're going to have Bruce Wayne show. I don't know if I can say Bruce Wayne in a recording, whatever. But like you're going to have these important people, and you need to make sure that like you don't mess up, because this is your, not even your life, this is your company.
Yeah.
And have like everyone with a credit rating of 99.
It's gated community horror.
Oh, jeez. It's almost like a social credit score where, so as speaking on your Regency question, I think it's basically identifying the core themes, the locations, the clues, and then working through how you can bring that to the modern era. So like, let's say if there's a ballroom dance, right? So it can be a social event hosted by a corporation. If you have to wander through like an abandoned Victorian home, then maybe it can be a modern mansion with just as much complexity.
Or you can have just weird, eccentric rich people that like, oh, isn't this delightful? We found this abandoned Victorian mansion for our ball. And then just that way you can have basically the same setting, but you can transplant a lot of modern devices into that as well.
And speaking about handouts, right? Text can always be transferred to audio logs or emails or text messages, forum posts.
No one has to keep a diary anymore. You can just pull up their text. You can pull up their email.
Audio handouts are great. Video handouts, even better.
They're fine.
See, and when you told that, this is where my mind goes. When you talk about reputation from like the Regency era, bringing it all the way to 2024, my mind immediately went to clout, internet clout. How many likes, subscribers, followers, how many people are engaging with the things that you're posting on right now. You could easily turn it into something like that instead.
Their HP is just internet points. That's their luck.
I mean, that's, I think some of the scenarios we heard about are like, the cults are no longer, weirdos in a basement or something. It's the neighborhood that's going, well, we figured out if we sacrifice, a kid a year to this altar that's in one of our, middle of town, we can all just keep quiet and we'll be millionaires.
That explains my HOA. So
doesn't
well.
it? All right, on the solstice, you really just stay out of the center of town. It's written up. But they don't have to put a face on it. You don't have to have masks and robes. Yeah. You can just be, oh yeah, I'm doing unspeakable things because it makes me rich. Yeah. I think money is a really good motivator to just be like, it's so much money. It's so much money if you just do this.
And also, who's to say that the person that you are talking to is who they are online? And that you can just have these very mundane people, and it's like, this is that username that you've been looking at, and somehow they managed to match it to this nice lady that was across the street. And it's like, oh, they're the ones talking about murder all the time? Don't like that. I also think, just in terms of being able to modernize things, I find a lot more inspiration material just in terms of movies. Like I mentioned Hell House, Holly's mentioned The Ring. Another reanimation that I've been wanting to do is to take The Darkness Beneath the Hill, but take some notes from like Barbarian, or be able to use different movie inspiration that way, because it's also your players will be able to maybe pick up on those cues and then contribute more to the scenario and build on it.
You're going to have required viewing. That's what you're going to do before the next scenario.
Have a watch list.
Yeah.
I don't particularly have anything else. Are there any other issues or recommendations that you have for like things in a modern age, or more of these technological horrors, or even non-technological horrors, but really that it's easier to capture within a modern setting?
Well, does somebody want to talk about, we have in our notes about the alien system for battery power?
Oh, I love it.
Because that is one thing that you don't really have in the old ones, is how do you run out of juice in the middle of it? It doesn't really apply.
Yeah, and that's for those that don't know. Alien, in my opinion, has a wonderful system for tracking battery life, where your relevant equipment items have a number next to them. Alien Year Zero is a D6 pool. So if my flashlight, I have a 6 next to it, that means that I have to roll, or I can roll 6d6 at key moments from the GM. Any 6s on there get removed from the stack. My battery life has gone down by that much. And so, boy, whenever you have a really good roll and lose 80% of your battery at once, damn, that sucks. It's a way that prevents your batteries from being a bit of a deus ex machina and adding that randomness and thrill to the gameplay, that like it's up to the player if their phone is going to last that long, or like are they going to lose their flashlight battery. That's you can't really capture that in other settings. An audience member asks if we think that's something we could do with a percentile system in Call of Cthulhu. I think that you definitely could do a percentile roll. I think that what I tend to like about these is that it feels more random, and it's also a case of when you have more dice, you are more likely to roll a bigger number. I am running Holly through Impossible Landscapes, and the other night they made a torch, and I used this rule for it, and I gave them 4d6 as they lit the torch, and I immediately rolled 3 6s. And then for the rest of the time, I'm like, oh, it's smelling like burnt plastic. And they were trying to keep putting stuff on it. And like, that last d6 would never come up. And so I was constantly rolling 1, and all of us were like, oh, but so being able to...
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, it's still at 5% battery.
I'm just getting stressed thinking about that. But to answer your question, yes, you could convert it to a percentile system. You could even use the luck mechanic, which is already built in.
Except I would want to maybe penalize it a bit over time. That if you were going to ask them to roll on battery, that's fine. But maybe you would choose... maybe at first it is at 100%. So great, they can't fail unless they roll an aught 0. You drop your phone or something, I don't know. But then maybe that battery life gets reduced by 5%. and you ask again, and you just kind of naturally keep a little bit of tabs on terms of like, this might be natural declining, but then if they fail, it jumps down an extra level. Because I think we've all been there where our phone's at 68% battery, and then we check again, and it's at 20. And so being able to have bad failures like that, I think can add more tension and suspense.
Your encounter with the unnatural can start draining it as well.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Unnatural draining stuff is very interesting. Or like if they're taking it over, they start charging it. Is kind of reverse expectations there.
Heat it up really
Yeah.
burn that battery.
Why is this bulging?
All your investigators have Samsung phones. That's so weird. D6 phone damage.
And if you're doing something intensive too, like maybe they stream for 30 minutes or something. Yeah, exactly.
Oh, yeah.
At that point, it's not even a chance. Like just you chuck a couple dice or a percent
And actually, the talk about streaming reminded me of one of the bigger points that, you know, I hear a lot, and I don't think it's as much of an issue as it's made out to be, is they can just post photos of it online. Like, it's a deep one. If you post that online, every neckbeard within 100-mile radius is going to be like, oh my God, that's so fake. I can see the pixels, AI-generated garbage. And like the burden of proof is going to be so much more if you want to try to get those lovely internet points. And so they're going to need to get more proof. You're going to need to go deeper because every neckbeard is going to be like, no way, that's stupid. Like, look, ooh, I made a scary ghost too.
How dare you say my Aunt Petunia is a deep one?
So there's two trains of thoughts on this streaming. You can just like cut it off or have the monster interfere with the stream, or you could go make this motivation lead the investigators deeper into trouble, because it's like, oh, you're getting criticized on live stream because they want a better look because they don't believe you. Okay, well, I guess we're gonna have to go deeper into the basement, and then that's where you can crank up the horror once more and hit them with more encounters.
It's really helpful too if they just cannot get a clue. Oh my God, so many times it's like, we're streaming. Hey, look, that wall looks like it has a hidden door. Because none of you took spot hidden for some reason. Hey, look, there's someone behind you. Oh, and then stab them.
LOL, who's wearing a mask behind you? And just like be able to call those out. Yes, absolutely. A part of me wants to be like, can I roll sand if people are bullying me online? That makes me feel bad. It's like, fucking loser, look behind there. Like, oh, damn. Okay. Like you can give it to them, but be playfully mean.
Or just lie.
Oh yeah, that's actually it's another scenario from Bud's RPG review and Alex Quixote. It's viral, and I think that they have a wonderful mechanic for. They're supposed to be live streaming, and we've talked about it on the podcast where it's like it actually lends really well to a 1.5 GM system where you have your main GM and then you have another GM who is just manning the chat, and they are essentially RPing everyone that's commenting on the live stream, and being able to have that person be like, oh my God, what was that? And the player be like, what was down that hallway? And the players be like, wait, no, what? And then like be able to bring them back, or just add in spooks that like, maybe it's nothing. Maybe. I think that it opens up the door for, like you're saying, kind of clue insurance, maybe.
Yeah, that's a good word.
I mean, I think that that's pretty much it from me.
I say take us out.
No. You all are going to be here for the next 8 hours. I'm going to keep talking nonstop. Anyways, no, thank you all for coming by. This has just been our talk about bringing 20 scenarios into the modern day. We'll be here for a little while to answer questions, but I think this is pretty much all that we had to say. I hope you all are enjoying the con, and have a great rest of your weekend.
I'm sorry, you have to go out single file. It's 200 or so is just too many.
I know.
Take your time.
Those of you that are in the back, real sorry. We can't use the emergency exits.
We have cards up here if anyone would like a link to our website and our podcast. But thank you all for coming.